Is this the one I've seen?
Yeah, because they were proposed to
Good evening, everyone. I don't have a gavel, so this is going to have to do. Yeah. I'd like to call the June 16th Grandview Heights City Planning Commission meeting to order. And should we do roll call first, or do we swear in first?
We can swear in first.
All right, we very happy to have, well, very sad to lose Commissioner Kelly, but in her place, Mark Hollard has very enthusiastically stepped forward to serve in her place and serve his community as a new planning commission member. So Mark, I really appreciate it. And Mayor, take it away on the
Come on up, Mark. Welcome. Ask you to hold the Bible in your left hand. Raise your right hand. There you go. Repeat after me. I, Mark Hollard,
I, Mark Hollard,
solemnly swear that I'll support the Constitution of the United States
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Charter and ordinances of the City of Grandview Heights.
the Charter and ordinances of the City of Grandview Heights,
Good job. And will faithfully, honestly, and impartially
and will faithfully, impartially, and honestly
discharge the duties as a member of the Planning Commission
discharge the duties of the Planning Commission
for the City of Grandview Heights and Franklin County, Ohio.
for the City of Grandview Heights and the County of Franklin, Ohio.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Did you know you'd be sitting next to Bob?
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry, pass it back down here. Pass it all over there. Thank you.
Again, we appreciate you taking on the position and the experience you bring. It can be very valuable to the commission, so thank you. Roll call.
Commissioner Wendell?
Here.
Commissioner Lobeo?
Here.
Commissioner Rourke?
Here.
Commissioner Fuller?
Here.
Chairman Gentry?
Here.
Mayor Kearns?
Here.
Councilman Panzera?
Here.
Chief Eisenhower is excused. Director Bushing?
Here.
City Attorney Kazam? Here. Director Keller?
Here.
Thanks, Amy. Any additions, corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from the May 19th, 2021 meeting.
Correction, April 21st, 2021.
I was just reading.
Oh, it's okay.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Those not in favor say nay.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Any changes to the agenda?
Not that we're.
All right, thanks. Well, we're going to start off with some old business, and I hope this doesn't go well for the rest of your time on commission, but I think Mark has to recuse himself from this first case, so I'll call you back in when we're ready. Okay, thank you. It's PC case number 02-2021. The case was tabled back at the April 21st meeting. This is for 1,000 Maryland Avenue, Southern Chase facility. Tim Mental from the board president of the association is going to speak on behalf. So I'll let you guys take it from there.
Thank you. Yep. Good evening. Thank you for the time. After the April meeting, we kind of went back and revisited our game plan because obviously our neighbors were not as enthusiastic about our fence replacement program as we were. Our first step is going to be to have the property line around that parking lot surveyed. Until we know what we're talking about, whose problem, whose gift is a particular area of the land, we don't know what we're doing. Unfortunately, survey companies are 8 to 12 weeks out because of all the property transfers going on in the county right now and to track someone down. So we'd like to pull the parking lot portion of the fencing project and just set it aside for right now. Our intent is, after we get the survey, to meet with those adjoining neighbors, hear their concerns, talk about alternatives, possible plans, and again, working together. Maybe our fence could cross 3 feet onto their property to tie into their fence and get rid of that no man's land that we spoke about back in April, things like that. What that's going to look like right now, I don't know. And we don't really have a time frame because there's been talk of drainage, possible grading, different types of fences that may be used. So we may need engineers, landscape professionals to help with that portion of the work. So we'd like to take the parking lot, set it aside, but we would like to request permission to move ahead with the fence replacement around the pool area. That fence is about 42 inches tall, easily scaled by persons in the middle of the night, and this would, and as opposed to doing chain link around the pool that we had originally planned on, these would be aluminum panels to provide a little more of a better look around that pool area. As I noted in the amendment request, there is a short 80-foot roughly linear area where there's no vegetation and the pool area would be visible from Erlin Avenue. In that area, we would plant shrubbery that would grow in and provide a visual screen. Obviously, there's going to be a few holes there for a couple of years until it grows in, but we would want that screen to grow in as part of that project. So that's kind of our amended request is just for that pool area, and we'll revisit the parking lot with our neighbors when we have a better idea what's going on.
Liz?
I think the applicant has communicated well what the project is. I would note again, the fence regulations as written a little bit tricky to apply because what's front, side, and rear yard on this lot is atypical for how the ordinances are written, however, Planning Commission has the ability to interpret the zoning codes as guidelines, and therefore you can apply your best judgment to those codified standards. And overall, I guess we would say that the fence proposed seems like a nice improvement. The screening seems to be appropriately located, and we have no objections. Would recommend approval.
Commission members, Francis?
Just some questions about the security of the pool. I mean, because you said during the middle of the night, people are jumping the fence, and obviously this is going to be taller. And the fact that they're just vertical makes it a little bit harder, hopefully. Is the pool open for the residents 24 hours? And how do they access the pool?
The pool hours are 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for any residents or development.
So what does that mean? Is the gate open, or is there a code for residents to punch in?
Entry is from the building, either from the parking garage or a separate door into the pool area. As people leave the pool area, they have to have a key fob to get back into the building to secure the building from someone jumping over the fence and coming in. Should it be necessary to exit the pool area in an emergency, there's a panic bar that sets off alarm. There are also closed circuit television cameras in the pool area that go to the concierge desk.
Have you considered maybe to a cover that, you know, at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. every night it closes? It's an additional security, but I guess if you have the video cameras too, that's another security.
Right, that's the primary reason for the cameras is that backup. Doesn't necessarily stop them from getting over, and they usually scatter as the door opens,
Right.
but
Yeah, I don't have a problem, like Elizabeth said, it is a unique property, so it's hard for you guys to be meeting some of the guidelines and things like that, but for me, it makes sense.
Yeah, just to clarify, is it just the pool area, or is it the pool and kind of the generator mechanical area adjacent to the pool? It's kind of all, from the street, it's kind of all one.
The existing chain link fence that's around the generator is not going to be touched, that will remain. So it's only the west and south sides of the pool area that are being replaced with the aluminum cables.
Okay. And I believe I saw some kind of examples of some of the shrubbery.
Please, it's not shrubbery, it's shrubbery.
Sure. Yeah, so it'll provide good screening from the street. And then just that last comment you made initial during the description. So the vegetation can be removed along Merlin, and it's kind of, here we go, there's the photos. So maybe overgrowth is kind of how I describe it right now. So that's going to be sort of cleaned up and replaced with some new plantings. And then so scroll down a little bit if you don't mind, Liz, or Laura Stratton, the next picture there. Yeah, that's kind of the, okay, so that'll be the proposed.
Right, that's an example of what we have in front of the generator that we're thinking of to put just on the outside of the pool fence.
Okay, and I think this picture is maybe what I was thinking of here. So that chain link around the generator will remain, it's just the pool area as the aluminum black fencing. Okay. No other question? Bob?
First of all, I appreciate your proposing essentially the same fence that the school board is proposing. So I appreciate that. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Did not.
So I appreciate the quality. As I said at the last meeting, I wish the solution was a little more ordered and in relationship to other things you're going to be doing. You don't know what that's going to be, and therefore you can't tell us what it's going to be. But I hope it doesn't end up being the randomness shown by the shuffleboard court that's been there probably for years, and that the overall plan of the landscaping for the property has an order to it and an aesthetic to it that is not just random. But I'm for the project. I don't even know why you're here.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob. I didn't have any additional comments or questions. Turn over Councilman Panzera.
No concerns, thank you. I look forward to opportunity to work with you on improving this on the service.
Mayor? All right, well, there's no other, we didn't have anyone ask to speak on this, so.
There was no public comment.
Your motion from the commission members?
Motion to approve PC case 02-2021.
Second.
Commissioner Wendell?
Yes.
Commissioner Rourke?
Yes.
Commissioner Heller?
He's excused.
Commissioner Leveo?
Yes.
Chairman Mitchell?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Lieutenant Captain.
You went all the way outside.
Yeah.
He's enjoying the evening. I don't blame you. I would have hung outside too.
That's nice.
Should we tell them what the vote was?
Yeah. I'll let him read about the on to new business, PC case number 3-2021. This is just a preliminary review of the Grandview Heights School District. The applicant's joint applicant with the City of Grandview Heights. So it's to review the plans that have been put forth for the brand new school project. Again, just preliminary review, nothing's going to be determined tonight. But I think we will be changing up the order of the presentation a little bit. We're going to start with Liz in the staff report, which does a good job of kind of encompassing where we've been and where we are at this point. And then we'll turn it over to the school district to take it from there.
Thank you. So as you all know,
Hang on a second.
sorry.
Joe?
We need to swear in witnesses.
Oh. I guess I should have done it with Tim. Sorry, this new setup has got me a little thrown off. So anyone who thinks they may be speaking in front of the commission tonight, please stand and raise your right hand.
I don't, should I?
You're speaking right now.
I don't think I am, but you never know.
You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Joel. All right, Liz, take mine.
Okay, so the last time the commission reviewed the planning commission case related to the school's campus, this overall project was more than 2 years, a little more than 2 years ago. And essentially, if you go back and read the minutes with that, it sort of stepped in the middle of the process in a sense, in getting my bearings. That was one of the things that I did. And also, of course, we were kind of engaged in doing some of the things that were requested by the commission at the time, notably working with the schools, the city and the schools, working together to work out the site plan. If you look at the previously, and I included the application from and the review from April 2019, the two site plans that were presented there, one was a little more similar to this one, probably the biggest difference being the parking lot still being on First Avenue. And the other was much more dissimilar. There have been many changes. There have been moves for all their various components. Much more detail that's been provided in the plans as they are now. So kind of bringing it back both for review of the school's site plan and all of the various features and all the things that will be located there. Review of some particulars now that the schools of the city have essentially nearly, I would say, finalized an agreement as far as how to collaborate on revising the site in total, including both right-of-way, school grounds, and future parkland. And so there's both updates as well as revisions, if you will. A variety of different things, and I thought with doing the staff report first, I might just kind of orient you to some of the questions that we're going to have from the commission so that you can be listening for those sorts of things during the presentation. And I'll kind of go through those as the staff report presents them. So the actually, I'll preview the overall things. The commission left the April 2019 meeting, favoring reconnecting Fairview and favoring the schools and the city working together to work that out. And so that's really the big change that has been worked out and has been consolidated. So the just again, I'm going to kind of go through the report in no particular order here, but there'll be new street amenities that are developed, including some street trees. There's existing wide tree lawn on Fairview Avenue. The anticipation would be there would be something similar on the west side in the future. There are, of course, there are also the ornamental trees along Oakland Avenue. I spoke with Director Patterson about, and he's interested in seeing if those might be able to be replaced at the end of the whole project. They've not fared particularly well there. The buildings that are there, there hasn't been a specific request for demolition approval of those buildings. They're sort of implicit given the site plan, but we want to ask for explicit approval in the August meeting when we come back to final site plan review. Of course, they do have some historic character, but schools have plans, I know, for documenting all of that, storing various things. And if you have any questions, I'm sure they can answer you or point you to someone with those answers. Big win for the city, I would say, is the reconnection of the road, pedestrian and bike network. The redevelopment will include reconnecting Fairview Avenue from 3rd down to 1st. Will include, let's see, so the circulation wise, the proposal is to have the street be able to circulate all the way south from 3rd down to 1st. And then given the location of the combined consolidated parking lot and the new entry for the schools being where they are, to also permit circulation from 1st Avenue kind of up to mid-block to access the parking and the drop-off from the south. So it will essentially be partially one way and partially two ways as proposed. And that was arrived at through lengthy conversations with both our safety services and police and fire departments both, as well as I'm joined over here by our traffic engineer, Dave Samuelson, who was very instrumental in developing a variety of different plans for review and approval by all of those parties, and ultimately the recommendation of the plan that we'll discuss a little bit more later this evening. In addition to the roadway itself, we'll also be looking at adding a multi-use pathway on the west side of Fairview Avenue, which will allow students, the bulk of which arrive from the east, to cross over Fairview at the 1st Avenue intersection and then be inboard so that they're in a safe location relative to the front door at that point. Adjacent to the pathways, also the sidewalk on the east side will be connected from where it ends right now, mid-block, connected all the way down to 1st Avenue. And there'll be street trees and for our tree lawns and ornamental lighting, which exists already there, kind of continue down to 1st Avenue. There are curb cuts existing for the existing parking lots on Oakland as well as on 1st Avenue. Those will be either abandoned or relocated depending on where you're looking at, and there'll be new curb cuts to the new parking lot, of course, and the new drop-off of Fairview Avenue. Very high level, and again, Dave can answer a variety of questions you may have about the traffic plan, but the hope and intent is that the circulation proposed for the street will contain the bulk of the school traffic on that southern leg of Fairview, which is the most institutional, if you will, of all of the areas around there. And actually reduce traffic on Oakland and reduce traffic on Broadview, prevent people from sort of circulating around neighborhood streets and keep them targeted towards where they want to go. Utilities-wise, there are some utility poles along Oakland. I might ask the applicant to speak about tonight with regard to whether those are staying or going. It's a little unclear on that. Sanitary and storm sewers are in relatively good condition. Storm will be augmented when the street goes through, of course. Water is present there, and there will be a piece of that that's replaced as part of the Fairview Avenue work that happens, just one piece that's still older. The safety services, again, we had many meetings with both our police chief and our fire chief and talked through all the various considerations for travel. The fire department, of course, interested in making sure that in case one street is blocked, they can get up the other street. They are south of this of the school facility, so their quickest path of arrival, if you will, is from the south, and so they like to have both of those streets accessible from the south. It was another consideration with the two-way southern portion proposed for Fairview. Also important to fire that there are drop-off lanes and pull-offs for traffic so that if there's an emergency, they can get past them. And we did review those down to the exact location of any of those, so they were, we can talk to you about any questions you might have about those. Also, the police department, we talked to them about their preferences for normal sort of traffic behavior and things that people naturally do and don't do, and made some adjustments based on that feedback to try to help people make good decisions naturally, just by virtue of how the layout works. And then finally, you'll see that there's a new traffic signal proposed for the intersection of Fairview Avenue and 1st Avenue. And you're welcome to ask questions of our city engineer us that it is warranted specifically due to school drop-off and pickup traffic, pedestrian commuter traffic specifically, not vehicular traffic per se, just as a side note. And there's the traffic report in there that goes into some detail about how that might want to operate. I will leave that to the question and answer session if you have that, but right now it's imagined to be very similar to the light at Oakland. Would be kind of normal street light operation throughout the day, no left turn during school days, and so similar operation proposed for that light. As far as this evening, if you look at section 3, preliminary major site plan review, some of the items that we would love to get your feedback on, because the hope is that over the next really month and a half till the application has to be resubmitted, that we address all of the concerns that come out tonight. So we encourage a kind of thorough question and answer session and sharing of your thoughts tonight. Let's see, so the reconnecting Fairview, the schools are proposing to deed that right away back to the city, as I mentioned. And the city has already submitted one grant application, and we intend to submit another one. Depending on which of those may be awarded, that may impact the extensiveness of some of the improvements. So for instance, there's grass tree lawns there right now. If we get one of the grants that we were that we put in for already, we may be able to increase and add some biodetention in those tree lawns that is a little bit more formal maybe. And just other, we may be able to break all the sidewalks. So we're aiming high to get things exactly how we want them and very well finished, but it is going to depend somewhat on grant funding. What will not depend on grant funding is construction of Fairview Avenue in a way that will allow the site circulation to happen the way we've proposed. And so that's not at risk, so to speak. That's guaranteed. We have some curb cuts and drop-off areas, widened street areas, on-street parking, all those sorts of things we've welcomed your input on. We have a huge win in the schools agreeing to partner with us to create an opportunity for additional city parkland where the parking lot is at the corner of First and the extension of Fairview Avenue. And would in advance, thank the school board and city council for supporting the efforts that we've been undertaking in that regard. The general configuration of the school campus, we welcome your comments on with regard to, again, drop-off zones, the parking lot. There's screening considerations, perhaps service yards and components. I was walking the area around the schools recently, and this, I know things are sort of in flux and in finalization, but there's a few elements around the school that might need screening or might want to have screening. Locations for and types of landscaping, the outdoor play area, site amenities, so locations of seating, bike racks, trash receptacles, if there's any concerns there. General review of the school parking lot with regard to stormwater management, trees and screening for both parking that's typically required for lots around the city, as well as specifically for lights coming from the cars, given the location adjacent to residential. The lighting, of course, again, adjacent to residential, making sure that we don't have spillover there, and we will ultimately for August have a lighting plan that will kind of go over some of those specifics. Jumping down to the other larger notes, the accessory building that has actually at this point been constructed probably 90%, wasn't actually shown on the prior plans that were generally approved by the Planning Commission 2 years ago. We want to just make sure that we get specific approval for that accessory structure for where it was located. City doesn't take any exception to where it's located. Seems like a reasonable location. With regard to accessory buildings on school campuses, Planning Commission is given more or less carte blanche to decide where works well for those to be located. There's not any standards that you have to really adhere to per se. Again, explicit approval for demolition of the middle school and annex buildings. Ultimately, there will be signage that also is submitted. It may come at a later time beyond August. We're not sure about that yet, but the thought is that we would, the school would like to put a sign in that city park to help orient people who are arriving at the First and Fairview intersection, know where they're going to get to the middle school. And so there may be signage in our park, which is sort of an off-site sign, so that's something to consider. And the city may also want to put a sign in the park, which would be 2 signs, or maybe they can be combined. So those are some considerations. Fences, there's fences that have been proposed. We'd like to get a sense of if those are acceptable. Given the exchange of property, which is depicted on the exhibit with the yellow kind of areas shown on it, we'll have a plat that will need to be approved that we hope to bring in August as well, showing the entirety of the new right-of-way as well as the new parcel for the parkland. And then actually there'll need to be a new parcel, I believe, for the parking lot as well, since it will be fully disconnected at that point from the rest of the parceling. And I know we just did a lot combination, but I think we now need to do a lot split, if you will, or a replatting. So that will be coming. And we also would like to get a recommendation, if possible, for rezoning of that lot on First and Fairview for parkland. Right now it is actually blanking on what it is, to be perfectly honest. It's probably R2 since it's part of the school property. We'd like to rezone that parkland just to really cement the function of that space in the future. And then finally, again, the previous planning commission meeting provided approvals for the location of the new building. The number of parking spaces was previously approved by planning commission, so that's not really part of the request tonight. Let's see. Again, looking for final approval in August. And let's see, I think that's pretty much it. If there's any concerns with the basic layout kind of proposed that will be captured in the new plat document, we'd love to hear any concerns about that tonight so that we can get those incorporated and have the plat ready. There's surveying going on right now. Ferris has been engaged to help with advancing some of the technical documents that we need as our city engineer to bring those forward. And I think that's it. Plenty, right? And the rest of the documents are really just for your reference for some prior hearing information. So with all of that in the back of your minds, I'm done.
Part 2 of the application.
Good evening, I'm Rick Espy, principal at MPSK with Landscape Architects on the project. Liz, did you want to walk through the first interior pieces of the roadway?
Sure. Well, we just included a few pictures at the beginning of the packet to help orient everybody. If you haven't looked at the images of how the schools will be when everything's finished, they're in there for your reference. And you can kind of see where the drop-off will be, where some of the school amenities are located. If you move to the, you can keep scrolling. Yeah. This exhibit kind of draws attention to the notion that the new entry for the middle school will be buried in the block, as indicated by the star there. There's a promenade of trees nearby, and I think the presence of the new park will really open up the view corridor to the front of the building, which is one of the benefits that we see that is kind of shown there. Also want to remind the commission, if you will, that the concurrent with the school's planning effort was the City Spaces and Places planning effort, and it suggested that reconnecting traffic along Fairview Avenue would be a positive thing, and we're happy that that was able to get negotiated and be before you tonight. And then the opportunities of planning goals, this is just to give you a sense of, on the commission's request that we go back and try to figure this out, we developed a list of some things that mattered to both the city and the schools. which would include improving safety service access from First Avenue with this reconfiguration, providing safer bike and pedestrian routes from First Avenue, since our traffic engineer has indicated again that 80% of the kids come from the southeast arriving to that intersection. Reducing traffic on Oakland and kind of managing and minimizing new traffic in front of the Fairview Avenue residences. Maintaining resident parking on both Oakland and Fairview, and you know, crazy idea full of, so I don't have anybody from Oakland here, but you know, we looked at lots of things, including reversing Oakland, and that doesn't work at all. But we kind of investigated every option and wanted to make sure that we knew if we were getting to the right one. Reducing overlapping traffic at the intersections of 1st and 3rd. So the idea being that the majority of high school traffic will now flow north on Oakland and kind of end up on the north end of the school, and that the middle school traffic will be more apt to stay on Fairview and stay on the southern end of the school, so there just be less mixing of traffic. Consolidating parking will also help both with wayfinding as well as keeping people from saying, oh, you know, this lot's empty, I'm gonna circle around to this other lot, and just doing a lot of extra driving, hopefully. And then that new community green space, obviously a high priority, and for the schools, the opportunity to create a naturalized outdoor learning area that they'll, I'm sure, present here in a moment. The next page in the exhibit provides more specifics, just the very, very specific things that will be happening. And you know, I'll let, again, I think that they're pretty self-explanatory, but you can see there the operation of the road, full length, one-way south, kind of in tandem to one-way north on Oakland, and the circulation from the south there. The next couple pages are Harris's early engineering drawings, making sure that what we're talking about would fit and work. And there you can see the ultimate desire with the red sidewalk to have a brick paver sidewalk and to accent that area. It's possible, however, if we don't receive all the grant funding that we would want, that would be concrete, like a typical sidewalk. We would, however, always plant trees in the tree lawns to make that be a very nice street. There is a narrowing mid-block that's evident there, which helps with crossing from the parking lot. And there's also, as Rich will talk about a little bit more, there's gardening space on the north end of that parking lot that the kids may be traveling back and forth from the new high school. And then you can kind of see the garage there in the corner. So that narrowing will help not only with pedestrian crossing of that area, but also will be the stopper, if you will, for northbound traffic, so that it's physically impeded. There'll also be signage there, a widened pedestrian plaza to help signal all of that operation. And I think that's the end of my fun, and now the actual fun. Rick has all the good stuff.
Next
Would you like to
meeting.
start from the slideshow?
I think this is the right spot.
Okay.
So I just want to say that this has been a really great collaborative process between the city and the schools. And I think the resultant plan is really becoming quite attractive. So when we look at the full build out of the schools, obviously the middle school is under construction or being constructed now. We're moving into the renovation of the high school. The actual plan for the demolition is going to happen next year. The site will actually be constructed in 2023. So that's kind of the timing of everything as we move forward. As we mentioned here on the full build out, as you can see, there's the areas both on the main school building and the parking lot. Fairview will become a public road, right-of-way road, as it splits through the site. Thinking about parking and vehicular circulation, as Liz mentioned, Fairview will be one-way south to about mid-block. And then from First Avenue, it'll be a two-way street. The access into that drop-off area happens from the south. The access into the parking lot to the south happens at the southern end as well. We have parking lots, about 130 spaces in the large lot. There's additional 4 spaces in the drop-off area, short-term parking, 21 spaces up in the northwestern corner, and then about 6 short-term spaces in there. So today, we've got 160 parking spaces. We're slightly more than that. We're about 164, 65, depending on you get all the ADA spaces and marked within that. As far as pedestrian circulation, main pedestrian circulation, as we mentioned, along Fairview Avenue, we think that there will be ADA access at all 4 corners, at Oakland and at Fairview and on First and Third. Those become really important crossings. But then also, as the pedestrians move through the site, whenever they cross a roadway, there'll be ADA accessible pathways in those locations. The major front doors, obviously you've got a major front door at the middle school, as well as a major front door up at the high school, and then there's some minor doorways as you enter into different areas of the school. Those will all be ADA accessible. Currently, the high school is not ADA accessible. There's a few steps to get up to the front door. We're bringing that grade up, and will be actually accessible into the front door of the high school. Furnishings and fencing, as you can see here on this diagram, there'll be a low fence, about a 4-foot high fence that surrounds between the parking and Oakland Avenue and the playground area. It surrounds that site and also goes along Fairview, separating the multi-purpose field from the roadway itself. That's going to be an aluminum picket fence. As you see, there's also a fence that surrounds the parking lot today. There's a chain link fence. We're not proposing that we move that, but it will become opaque. We don't want the headlights from the cars going on to the nearby property owners' backyards. So that will have an opaque sliding fencing to block down those views of the headlights. Some of the images of what that looks like you see here. Of the other amenities, I guess I should have talked about. We have a wood deck system on the middle school. This is kind of a hangout, gathering space for the students, outdoor learning opportunities. We have bike racks, trash receptacles, recycling receptacles scattered throughout the site. The low fence, as you see here, will be aluminum. There's no pickets on the top rail, so nobody can get injured that way. And then the opaque chain link fence surrounding the parking lot. You can see that. Lighting throughout the site, we paid a lot of attention to that. We'll be using cutoff fixtures everywhere so that no light goes off of our site. We've got pedestrian fixtures that you see here in the yellow. We've got the street fixtures that go along Fairview. We've got parking lot fixtures in the parking lot itself. And then we've got some accent lighting in the bosk of trees as you enter into the front of the building, which will kind of uplight those trees. Here you can see the fixtures, that pedestrian fixture being a bit more contemporary in character, the street light being that Gregory Heights uses, and then the parking lot light, all again cutoff fixtures so we're not spilling light outside the project site. The playground and outdoor learning areas, these are really special areas for the kids. The playground, as you can see, is located just to the west of the front door of the middle school. That'll have new playground equipment, and it'll be designed in such a way to be kind of innovative and fun for those students. One of the most exciting pieces is this outdoor learning space that's happening on the northeast corner of the high school. And that image, that thought is that this is a great gathering place. This is an outdoor learning. This is going to have outdoor classrooms. It's going to have gathering spaces for students. It's going to be learning opportunities with bioretention and things like that in that space. You can see some of the images here, what might happen there with seat walls and gathering spaces, seating for classrooms. Here you can see that collaborative kind of approach to the street where the city is doing everything within the right of way. So they've got the tree lawn, the curbs, the tree lawn, the street lights, the sidewalks, and then from the back of the sidewalk to the building is where the outdoor learning space is going into. And we'll be collaborating in terms of making sure those things seem seamless together. From a stormwater standpoint, we talked about bioretention. We've got bioretention cells both in the parking lots as well as adjacent to the building. Here we're doing the right thing with stormwater. We're picking it up, we're cleaning it before it goes back into the sewer system. Vegetation, we'll be working with the city in terms of the actual selection of choices, street trees, shrubs, ground covers are all things, but we'll be all picking those from the standard and required street tree list within the city. So that, we'll come back to that in August with the actual species that we'll be using, but it'll be lush. I'm sure I missed something, but I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good commission members here. Bob, start with you.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Before I start asking questions, I want to sort of make a statement about the team that worked on this project, which include the owner, contractor, design professionals. It's the way a project should be run. I thank you for that. I wish more projects in Grandview could be managed this way and have these kind of outcomes. I think it's an excellent piece of work, and I thank you for being here, and please thank your friends at Perkins and Will for doing the excellent job they do. A couple of questions. Clarify again for me why Fairview isn't two-way all the way through?
That was actually, maybe Liz can jump into this, that was working through E.B. Harris, the city of Grandview Heights Civil Engineering Group, and they looked at a number of different scenarios, and it was determined that only to have it one way on that north piece. Do you remember
The short answer is that it would eliminate all of the resident parking on the east side of the street. And so, again, we're trying to be considerate of all of the users, the street users. Also, it prevents, and again, Dave can speak to this, it prevents traffic from traveling north and mixing with the high school traffic and making the intersections at 3rd and Oakland and 3rd and Fairview busier. So it distributes traffic in a better way. I don't know if you about the answer.
That's a fairly substantial response. Yes.
So I read about the mixing, but I'm not sure what the high school people would be doing going south on Fairview. Where would they be going?
It's more the middle school traffic traveling north.
But they're not going anywhere. But I do appreciate the opportunity to give residents on the east side of the street an on-street parking place. I think that makes a lot of sense. In relationship to that same section of street, teen buses that come from other schools, particularly in the winter, that deal with basketball, they turn around and I think in the drop-off, I think that's the intention, but where would they park?
There's two parking spots. One, there's a lay-by parking spot. If we go to the next
I got the little yellow one here in front of the gym door.
Yeah, that's fine, we can talk here. Yeah, so there's a drop-off area here in front of the gym door, as well as along here in this parking area. That's where there's a short walk in both locations into the gym.
Is that what it is?
I'm sorry, because I couldn't see what you were pointing to.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a drop-off area here and a drop-off area here.
Thank you.
And so the one to the west off of Oakland is actually large enough to handle about 3 buses.
So they'll be marked accordingly, right?
Yeah.
And then the drop-off is big enough for them to turn around and go back north.
Yeah, this drop-off.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
This is picking.
Just to add to that, I think there's intention that the buses could park in the parking lot.
And on where the kindergarten is now?
No, the big parking lot.
Yes. Thank you.
This is sort of nitpicking, but since Oakland remains one-way north, why is there a two-way exit and entrance into the little 6-unit parking lot off of Oakland rather than one way in and one way out, allowing you to pick up a few more cars?
The entrance is really to handle those buses and the larger vehicles. We need that kind of a turning radius to get in there. So it's not so that they can make a left-hand turn out of there. It's just the right-hand turn that we need for turning radius.
Good answer. Let me ask a question about fences. the fence on the south side of the parking lot, east of Fairview.
Down here?
South side,
Up here.
yes.
Yeah.
You may be able to exclude that because that developer is building a fence along his entire property line. So
Yes.
it would be worthwhile for somebody to talk to him to see what.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
He's now budgeted for a fence there. And my guess also, the neighboring residents who live on Broadview all have fences in their backyard, and a discussion may want to be held with them as to how you could best work together. But I really appreciate the fence you're proposing. I just think if you work with those homeowners, it might be a different opportunity.
Yeah, we have an existing chain link fence that's there today, surrounding that parking lot.
Is
So
that-
we would just be
So if it's a
enhancing that.
double fence there, maybe? from-
I think maybe in some cases.
I think I'm the only property owner with a fence. Everyone around me does not have a fence on Broadview. They use the school's fence.
Okay. Just a coordination issue.
Yeah.
Good for you. And then I have a property line question. The phenomenal gift of the city park on First Avenue. Is there going to be a property line, right-of-way line between the park and the right-of-way of Fairview? It's drawn as if there's no property line separating separating the road from the park.
Yeah.
There will be, Bob, if you go to this exhibit in the staff report, I don't know if you can see it from there, but.
What page?
Page 6 of the staff report. We would anticipate a new parcel number and separate lot for the city park, and then the right-of-way would be straight, more or less.
Yeah.
I would assume that the right-of-way line for the street would be the property line for the
Right,
park.
correct. Couple other things. The fence, let me start from the design point. The athletic part of the site plan south of the junior high school
Yep.
Starts out in a nice orthogonal idea. And then at the end of it, somebody lost control of their pen or their pencil, and it turns into a non-orthogonal idea.
Yeah.
Now, there must be a phenomenal aesthetic reason for that to happen, but I'm wondering if you couldn't be a little more prudent with the amount of bicycles you can have, the amount of recreation you have, if it went to a more orthogonal solution. That's just my guess.
Right, yeah, the actual multi-purpose field is orthogonal.
So it gets to that corner.
And the upper area of the corner is really kind of left over from the playground. It's really more moundy and things like that associated with the playground than it is for the athletic field.
I would hope you would look at it orthogonal. Now, let me switch gears a little bit and go to the southwest corner of that, let's call it open playground or multi-purpose. I think it's brilliant the way you've landscaped between Oakland and that playground. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I think that's that's changed on the east side where there's a fence to protect the people that are on the playing field. So I love the landscaping idea to the west with the openness of the fence on the east. However, I wonder if the fence that goes north and south along the walk would consider continuing that idea of zoning landscape outside of playground and make that a more distinct kind of a condition aesthetically. And then that would also then lead to the probability of the, I'm going to say two out parcels that are on First that are hopefully going to be accommodated by the city in some future manner, and then would have an aesthetic connection to the multi-purpose field, of which I think your plan should try and anticipate. For example, the Elms entrance has no focal point on its south side. It certainly could have a wonderful focal point on First Avenue when that gets developed as in the future. or indeed, if it never gets developed, the south property line of the multi-purpose field would be a great place for a flagpole, something, anything as you came out of the entrance to the school, and their focus was the ending of the access that you have for the junior high school.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the reason for the fence on the east side of the multi-purpose field is really to keep the balls from getting kicked out.
No, I think it's a great idea, and that's why I like the landscaping on the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, now you could almost eliminate the fence when you use the landscaping as an idea. I think aesthetically it's fine to do that, but I would think it would have a more orthogonal condition than to warp itself out towards Oakland, that it maintain its more orthogonal plan of the Georgian architecture, by the way.
Yep.
That you were blessed with or harnessed with, whichever. I hope this is the last. The grading for the wonderful art sidewalk on the north side of the high school, great idea. I assume as it gets to the corner of Oakland and Third, there's no grade change there at all. It's all flat.
Yeah.
I ask that selfishly because my grandson has a tree planted in his honor in that corner. I want you careful.
We'll be careful.
Thanks for your good work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Mark? Comments, questions?
And thanks again. I appreciate what Bob said, and thanking everybody's hard work on the project. It's exciting to look at. It'll really be my first case to really have some input on. I guess some of my questions were, first thing was revolving about the lighting around the property and stuff. Covering up that plan might be helpful. You have three basic types of lighting. One of my, I guess, questions is the use of your parking lot lighting, more the high bay, where, this campus is kind of more intimate and stuff, and I usually associate high bay with big box stores or, larger developments, and just wondered if there were opportunities to start using some of your other two type of lighting within those areas. One reason too is if you overlay your landscape plan with your lighting plan, two of those high bay lights are right on top of the tree planting. Next to are in the middle of the parking lot. The next two are right next to the property north of the parking lot. And I think probably to help out with the garden area, but I'm more excited seeing the pedestrian light and the post light types that you're showing and scattered around campus. And I think by using some of those, could you explore maybe using that in the parking area, coordinated with the trees and your plantings, and maybe make it a little more intimate and less likely to have the deflectors and cutoffs that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, all the fixtures have the cutoffs and reflectors on them to not have it. We can actually look at that to see whether the middle fixture here could be spaced out. This is not a really tall fixture. I think it's about 14-foot height. So it's not like what you would see at a big box store. It's kept down lower. And it's really an efficiency of a fixture, right? To cover that parking lot with the more pedestrian fixture is going to take more fixtures to do that, but we can study that.
Lighting at drop-off areas. On one of your plans, you show the two main drop-offs, and then you have a number of drop-offs on the sides at Oakland and on Fairview. And on your lighting diagram, you don't show any lighting. Maybe it's all existing right now, and that's why it's not shown in your drawings.
They will all be illuminated.
Appropriately. With, again, on the fencing and things, for that diagram that you showed, one of the things, I know it's just a diagram right now, but the fence sort of is weaving in and out and crossing the the sidewalk in various locations, and I'm assuming you haven't really worked where, what side of that sidewalk it's gonna be on. It kind of looks confusing to cross over that the sidewalk sometimes out of the fence, sometimes inside of the fence, and it's just a circulation issue, how you're bringing people in from the main sidewalks, and then is there gonna be a gate there that they have to walk through at that crossover, as you envision?
Yeah, so there's, besides the fence line, I think if you go on to the next image, there'll be, I'm sorry, back to the furnishings. One more back. Yeah, there you go. So there will be gate posts where, whenever that fence crosses the pedestrian area. And we want to make sure that we're defining the area of the playground where the children are located, away from the vehicles and things like that. So we want to make sure that there are those thresholds that they can cross into with gates associated with them.
I think, in the parking area too, maybe the fence, the existing fence with the slats may help out on it, but it seems like in that area between the property line and the parking, having some shrubbery would help, buffer the neighbors with the parking area, cut down on some of the light, even with the the slats and fences, sometimes light can get through there a little bit more and will help buffer noise and things too. Is there consideration to increase some of the landscaping in that area by chance?
We could look at that.
And the other thing was on your bike rack and furnishing plan, you had everything sort of oriented towards the Fairview or Oakland side, I guess. And, Oakland side, but I didn't see anything on the Fairview side. Will people becoming, or students becoming parking because of the secondary?
Yeah, exactly. That northeastern corner near the outdoor learning space, there's a series of bike tracks there as well. If it wasn't marked on the plans, I apologize.
I'm really excited to see the development of the outdoor area, and especially with having COVID happen over the last year, to encourage those types of spaces for students is really a great thought. Is there, I guess when you're detailing it, are you looking at skateboards and how to prevent some of that, taking over the space and marring the nice
Every
surfaces?
project that we do, we're looking at skateboarders.
That's it for me right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Eric? Yeah, thanks. I just want to echo Bob's statement at the top. There's a lot of good stuff here to work with, and everything's in great shape. So excited to be helping out here as well. I think I'll just kind of try to break it down, kind of with a mission, I guess, from a major site plan perspective. It might be easier if we just go through slide by slide here. If you mind, let's go to the pedestrian. Let's start with some of the pedestrian circulation. If you don't mind, thanks. So just maybe as a little bit of exercise, I think you've covered a lot of great information. One of my notes here is just you kind of take us as a walk to school. I'm a student, kind of as an exercise. I'm going to the junior high. I'm on west of the school or east of the school. Kind of walk us through this diagram.
Well, if you're, as Pila said, there's 80% of the students are coming from that southeastern area. So you'd actually come up the sidewalks along first. You can turn either along the eastern side, or you cross the road there, and you come in along the right of way along front, or along Fairview all the way up to the main entry, and then you come into the building. The fence there keeps them from crossing across, and we're in a pathway across the athletic field, the multi-purpose field as well. Similarly, if you're coming from the west, you come up Oakland, do a major crossing there, and then proceed in. And then there's a sidewalk that progresses through the playground to the front door.
On the eastern one, I guess my question is the drop off. It seems like you've got 2 additional crosswalks. Could we just bend the, along the fence line, can we just turn left at the drop-off area? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so they
Go there instead
the
of-
turn here to go up in, yeah, right across here.
Just
Yes.
get more traffic?
Yep.
So right there, okay. Let's see here, so now I'm dropping my kids off. Just same exercise, right? We're gonna come in from the west, you're gonna go to the existing drop-off lot. I guess I call it existing, right?
Yeah, if you come in and you turn and are going northbound along Oakland, excuse me, you'll come to this drop off where you can pull in, drop the kids off to the middle school, and then continue on out. We're going further north on Oakland.
And then same thing, let's do the Fairview one.
On Fairview, you'd make a turn on Fairview, you'd come up to the drop off there. If you're coming in from Third, you'd make a left-hand turn at Third, come down and enter the drop off that way. And then you'd have to proceed southbound if you're coming in on Fairview to get out to First Street.
I hate to interrupt, but since we're talking here, I thought there were some left turns that were prohibited. Which ones are those? Because he said
Yes,
turn left, and I'm questioning
I
those.
was just commenting about that. At this point, we are recommending no left turns
Okay.
from eastbound First to go north on Fairview, similar to how it is now at Oakland. The main reason at Fairview is there are so many students crossing that north leg and so many drivers coming from the east turning right that it's practically impossible to make a left turn onto Fairview from First. And given the traffic that we studied several years ago for the school campus, relatively few come from the west and are actually able to make that left. And those that did make the left did it before the surge. So they were, for example, faculty.
Maybe you just build on that as well. You talked about bump outs at Third and Fairview, and then this other bump out to prevent the northbound from First Avenue. Is there any, these are just bump outs, pretty standard, no, the crosswalk one, seems there's no elevation raise in the crosswalk or anything like that. It's just a simple bump out.
The one on the north end of Fairview, there's not an elevation raise plan because of the necessity to integrate with the rest of Fairview. We don't currently control that right of way, although the administration is working with the city of Columbus to try to gain control of that right of way. Things could yet improve further than they are, but right now, the northern one is not planned to be raised. However, the mid-block one is planned to be raised as part of the bump out there. There'll be a lot of different signals to drivers that going further north is not copacetic.
Let's see here. Look at my notes. So the outbuilding, that was kind of new to me as well. I think I saw that on the drawing. Do you want to discuss what the purpose of it is? It's part of that parking lot.
Yeah, the purpose is maintenance building. So someplace that the schools can hold their snow equipment, their all those type of things in there. It's access from the parking lot to the front door, or the door into the building is actually on access with the drive aisle. So that's what the reason for its location.
Georgian architecture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a matter of point of view, but the intent was to reflect the same architecture of the entire building.
Excuse me.
Oh, no. The low fence, I think I kind of echo some of the comments that were made tonight about the fence along Fairview. Just trying to maybe make the Oakland side of the park and the Fairview side of the park a little more consistent when it comes to landscaping. I guess I'm looking at the trees that are going to be planted along the parking lot and thinking to myself, you know, yes, it's nice to screen those, but at the same time, let's kind of maybe screen that fence. It's like a big chunk of just straight fence to be looking at. So just a thought there from an aesthetic standpoint, you make the Oakland side of the park and the Fairview side of the park a little more consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. The reason the trees were left off the west side of that Fairview is actually to open up that view to the front door of the middle school. So as you line that street with trees, that view to the front door is going to be blocked.
Circling back to Liz, you mentioned the grant. What components of the grant is going to help with the streetscape? Is it just the sidewalk? I think you mentioned some stormwater retention.
One of the components of the grant that we were able to ask for is to pay for, improvements to stormwater management strategies. One of which could be to integrate the tree lawn area bioswales or hard wall detention. There are a number of examples around town by now. So if we receive that grant, we would be able to incorporate some of those features, which again, I was talking to Director Patterson earlier, who kind of in charge of our sidewalks and street trees, and he would be in favor of as much of that as we can because of just the, kids like to monkey around with trees a little bit. They get some extra love, and that would help protect them from too much love. So we're hopeful that we'll be awarded that grant. We've been told that it's high probability, so we're optimistic. And that would go towards specifically improvements in all of the pedestrian and bikeway aspects of the project. We will also be going for a PWC grant that is specific to the roadway. But again, we included as many upgrades to the pedestrian and bike commuter sphere as we could in the first grant application. And hopeful to hear about that in December to know for sure. While I say that, I will say that our intent is to do the engineering drawings to include all of the things we would like as kind of buy-up options, and then be able to determine what we're able to buy once the grant comes in.
I think we were looking at an earlier rendering, the outdoor learning area that seemed to depict potentially some bias and retention along the sidewalk.
It did, yes. And the other thing with bioretention is that actually creates a better buffer between the roadway and the students along the sidewalk. Turf grass, obviously, you walk across turf grass everywhere, but the bioretention creates a bit more buffer.
And that would be a high priority location to place those. If we had a reduced grant award or something, because we're trying to get people not to stop in that first leg of Fairview and to get down to the pool outskirts. We're pulling north a little bit where the existing southern curve is into that parking lot on that end. We're looking at pulling the drop off north that far to provide a little bit more loading for the school buses and trucks for the band when they load up out of the school there. So we really want to get people to drive down Fairview a little distance and then pull into that drop off before they stop. So if we're able to include that hard wall detention there, that would be a high priority.
Let's stick on that section of Fairview then. Residents, have they any feedback from the residents on this one way for a portion of the street?
Yeah, we have. We actually had we've had 3 resident input meetings already to specifically talk about the functionality of the street. The feedback that we've gotten is, of course, they appreciate that the parking is going to remain. Some of the comments have been kind of oriented around, it feels like you've done as well as you could to maintain the character of the street in front of our homes as close to what it was before as could be done. So it was really mostly, nobody loves the idea of a one-way street, but I think there was a lot of understanding about why it needed to be that way, and appreciation for keeping the parking and for trying to keep traffic off that section of street as much as we could.
Let's see here. The lighting, number of parking spots. The design of the park, I think that's a great comment as well. Is just to be consistent, planning over the park to a city, rezoning that as parkland. I'm totally in favor of all of that. We just gotta work together, continue to work together, I guess, as we have successfully here, to make sure that those two things are harmoniously built and designed. Maybe the last question is going to be on the stormwater stuff. Can you just speak a little bit more about what you're intending? There's 2 of them. One is in the parking lot, and one is next to the school.
Yeah, the one next to the school actually picks up some of the downspouts from the school itself. We have to be able to clean those. The one in the parking lot is picking up all the parking lot. So everything that, every bit of pavement within the parking lot is draining to this center island. Nothing is coming off of the parking lot.
I just want to say just one thing, just because I feel compelled to do so. Bill and Nancy Boardman, I think 1958 graduates of Grandview Heights High School donated $250,000 for that outdoor learning space. So just, I think it's always good, especially someone who stroked a check for that amount, just to recognize that is a manifestation of that donation. So kudos to them.
I wasn't here in the previous meeting, so I have a lot. So, just want to mention, I appreciate the intersection signal report for traffic control. It was very detailed, but I still have some questions for Dave. So on the Fairview and First, I see that we're showing 3 crossings. Makes sense to me, you know, kind of force them to just cross in one spot, but let's face it, you have sidewalks on both sides, people are still gonna cross. Does that make it more dangerous that people are crossing where they're not supposed to? I mean,
The biggest reason we wanted them to cross first on the west side was because first, most students are already on the north side, first when they're going to the school. But if they are on the south side and crossing on the east leg, we have a problem with people trying to leave the school after they dropped off their children.
turning left.
So if they're turning left, they're conflicting with students crossing. And like we mentioned, 80% are heading back that way. And the last thing we want to do is people get gridlocked where they can't leave. So the solution was to have the students cross on the west leg. That doesn't mean at other times of the day people cannot cross that lane. It's just that we will encourage through the design crossing on the west side of the intersection.
Would you stripe it this way, or would you just encourage it with a crossing guard?
We haven't quite worked out that detail if we're going to put up a sign saying no pedestrian crossing. It could also be we don't put up ramps on that side of the intersection.
What about would you do something similar in Oakland, or because there's no exits from Oakland, there's no need for?
Oakland is a little different in that the student volume is still quite a bit, but it's not nearly as substantial as at First and Fairview. You're probably talking 3 to 1 in terms of numbers. But how the students cross that north leg is different because they're coming from the lower population area of Grandview Heights schools, crossing that north leg. They also could just continue on that north side of First and stay on the west side of Oakland and cross mid-block where we have the crossings already.
I appreciate, I mean, Bob already kind of addressed the one-way, they're not popular. There's pros and there's cons, so I just want to discuss some of the cons or concerns, just to make sure that we're thinking about this before we build it. I mean, one of the negatives of a one-way, when people are just going one direction, there's no more cars coming the other way. People tend to go faster. So if we're gonna choose to go with the one-ways, we need to encourage or, you know, do traffic calming to minimize that. I don't see that in Oakland. I mean, Oakland, I know that we try to do some traffic calming, but it's a very wide road. And it's just by nature, without even thinking, you're just gonna go faster. Especially there's not many cars coming from other sides. It's residential, so what we are doing on Fairview with the bump outs, I think we should do something similar at a minimum at the intersections of First and Third. I have seen people on Third with their blinkers to go left. They catch themselves, but it's like I'm cringing when I'm walking. I see them like they're trying to turn. I'm like, you can't turn. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, you know. It's so wide. It just doesn't, if you're not from Grandview, it doesn't, you know, intuitive. It's not intuitive, it just seems wide. So if we can put a bump out there too.
On where exactly?
On Third and Oakland,
Yeah.
similar to what we're doing on Third and Fairview.
Instead of having 2 lanes at the end.
Yeah, and I know there might be some turns issues, but I mean, if we're doing it over here, we can do it over there. Just to make it more obvious that it's a 1 lane. I saw the other day, people leaving, the restaurant where the laundry mat is. There's a driveway cut there. They came out, turned left. So I'm crossing them. I'm always looking to see if someone's coming from my left. And all of a sudden I realize there's a car coming the wrong way. I'm like, what are you doing? Again, there's an issue there with the one-way. Not saying do not do it one way, but we need to fix some things in here to really make it safe if we want to go with the one way. So the multi-use, just some concerns. So the number one, if it's a multi-use, it should not be brick. It's a bike facility. You do not do brick with bike facilities. It has to be a smooth surface. You're ever pushing a stroller on a brick surface for that long, or even hiking, it's just not pleasant. I understand the purpose of the multi-use because there's a lot of bikes. It makes it safer to get the bikes out of the street, but it doesn't make it safer for pedestrians. Bicyclists go faster than pedestrians. This is going to be heavy walk. It's a low-speed road. It's 25 miles per hour. School time is 20. From the standpoint of safety for the pedestrian, for me, the bike should stay in the street. It slows down traffic too, because there's a bike in front of you going at 10 miles per hour, you have to go 10 miles per hour. So something to consider for that. There's issues too with the multi-use. I mean, as a motorist, I can see a pedestrian walking to the crosswalk, and I can see them slowly, and I can make a judgment, do I have time or not? Bikes can go a lot faster, and they can come from nowhere, and I might not be looking for a bike at that point. So that's what I think they should be on the street. That's just my opinion. So that's my comments on the traffic. Well, I guess one more thing. Matt mentioned about the bike racks. I think we should add more bike racks close to the park too. I mean, there's bike racks for the school. What are we thinking about? Some bike racks for the park?
For the city park?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that would happen with the design of the city park.
Okay, so that was
The
separate.
city park has not been designed yet,
Okay.
so.
And just clarification on that, the city's intent is to really just put that space into green space. There might be trees or there may not, but really to do a parks master plan, starting maybe next year sometime. And there's a few other spaces you may hear about over the next year that would be included as opportunities for redevelopment for our parks. So we don't want to build anything now without doing that master plan.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. This was discussed already, but the screen fencing, I think we can do better than that. I think if there's a residence back there, that it should be more screened than what we show in this picture here. I mean, I'm looking at the picture, I can still see the cars, I can see everything. The library has some good examples of the type of fence that they use and or landscaping, and I'm sure we discussed about talking to those property owners, and they might have their own ideas, but I think we can do better. If I was a resident there, I would say you can do better than that. For lighting, I would recommend to add some lighting at the crossing to make sure that the cars can see the pedestrians crossing. And make sure that it's on the right side. So if I'm gonna cross the street and cars are coming on my left, that light needs to be on the left to put a spotlight on me. And as I cross, then the light should be on the right to put the spotlight on me for the cars coming from the right. It seems like there's, in the intersections, I think we're okay. It'll be more on that mid-block. And of course, this is a one-way street, so you just have to worry. The light should both be on the right side. About the grant, Liz, that you're talking about for the bioswales, I think it is a great idea, and I think you touched on that it could be a good buffer to prevent pedestrian crossing mid-block or areas. So I think that would be great. And that's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Reese. I've got a couple of things as well. I think a lot of the commissioners hit on some of the questions I had. Liz, in the staff report, there was a comment about, I basically had a question if there would be any changes on Third Avenue, and I think there was a comment in there that there's some discussions with the city of Columbus. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, of what we could see, or what the discussions are?
Yes, so we've talked to, been in some early conversations with the city of Columbus, requesting an adjustment to our corporate line to be able to take, to add the area just between the high school and the athletic field into Grandview. It's not right now the intersection on 3rd and 3rd Avenue itself at Oakland is in Grandview, but the intersection with Fairview is not, and the corporate line is closer to Oakland along 3rd Avenue. So early, what's that? We want to take their property. We're mighty. We're mighty. Yeah. They're so far expressing, positive outlook on that opportunity, and that would, allow us to control those intersections a little better, more easily, and also to connect the schools, potentially to be able to improve that roadway in a way that can be augmented more so than it is now. That's not included in the plans right now. We don't have any jurisdiction, but we're working on it, and that may take a couple of few years to get executed, but that's the hope.
So it is trending positive.
It's trending positive.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of questions about stormwater and specifically with the parking lot. I think a lot of those were answered. I guess my biggest issue, and the thing I'd like to hear about is, from the very first discussion of this project, the thing I was so excited about is all the green space facing First Avenue, and just envisioning kids going to school and going in that front door and that main entrance, and now there's a fence, and I don't know, it almost plays like some 60s hippie song. We paid for this beautiful park, and now you put a fence around it. I see the fence; it's a nice fence, but it makes me think it's a dog park, or you're trying to fence in daycare. I don't like the fence at all anywhere. I think where the city park is, connecting it with the larger field, and Mark had brought up as well. It's zigzagging through the Oakland side of it. I mean, if the fence is simply there to keep a ball from going out into the street, I don't think it's worth it. Bob had touched on as well, there's some sort of point out there that, if it's a very ornate fence in there's a stone archway that is at the corner here that is, Grandview City Schools, kids can pass, the way it's set up now, you're forcing kids to go across a couple extra crosswalks that they wouldn't need to if the fence wasn't there, and they could just walk across the field to the school. Maybe it's a bit too idyllic and too naive, but I just don't see the need for that fence there. So, if you want to talk about it now, or if you want to consider it,
Yeah, we can obviously study it. I understand what you're saying as far as fencing in. I think part of it was the balls, being able to control them going out onto Fairview, which could be have traffic on it, which hasn't been there before. It's a fairly small, multi-purpose field. It's going to get a lot of wear and tear, and to have the ability for the students to cut kitty corner across that lawn area and wear down a pathway. I think it limits your usability of the multi-purpose field. We'd hate to see a path kind of get put in there and actually put a concrete path in, because now you're cutting down your multi-purpose field to something that's not very functional from a multi-purpose field standpoint. But yeah, we can study that and see kind of how it might be modified.
Yeah, I wouldn't say put a path across it or anything. I mean, also, if you're trying to help them avoid these two crosswalks, you would have them go around the fence here and walk across the grass to that nearest sidewalk. So, I think you have to address that if you were to leave the fence in place.
Right.
Maybe, consider some sort of opening down here in the corner that it can be a focal point of the grounds, and kids can walk across if they want, or they can go up the sidewalk if they want. But it really changes my perception of the site from that perspective.
Sure.
It's something I asked them to consider.
Okay, we'll look at it.
One other question with the accessory building, is there lights on it? I was looking at the lighting plan, and I don't think I saw.
There may be a light over the door, but I don't know for sure.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I hope not.
I'll have to check the architectural plans and see what that.
Probably something that we should take into account, for the lighting discussion. And we did have, I apologize, I haven't heard that, we did have a neighbor standing issues and comments. They're here tonight.
I am here.
Are you Elizabeth Waters?
I am.
If you'd like to state your name and address and relay your comments, you can come up to the podium here.
That's fine. Okay. Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Waters. I live at 1263 Broadview Avenue, and I've lived there for over 27 years. When I first moved there was a house behind me. The school bought that house and turned that area into the play area that it became before this project. And I will also just say from the outset, I was incredibly happy with the education my daughter got at the school. I supported this project. She just finished her freshman year at NYU with nearly a 3.9 GPA. I was very proud of her. And as I told Andy, I attribute that to the education she received here at Grady. So please understand I support the project. However, the two issues I want to talk about are the lighting and the screening in the proposed parking lot behind my house, as well as the stormwater management for the consolidated school parking lot. You may not know this, but it's been paved since last March with no storm water removal, and my yard has been flooding dramatically. And I'm sorry I didn't get you the pictures before today, but I've raised the issue with the school, and I provided them with the pictures of the flooding that happens in my yard as a result of the fact that the construction crew needed to have all of that paved for all of their trucks, and the cement mixer that's behind the house, and the building, it's the size of a house, the construction said. It's just now getting its roof finalized, but it's a very large building. It has no gutters. There's, I believe, someone indicated this evening that there are a couple potential storm areas, but they are not being used. They're covered up. So for a year, my neighbors and I have been dealing with a lot of water because, as you know, the kindergarten building flooded all the time, and that whole area is on a significant slope. So they've had to level it off, but the water is all just now coming over. That's a significant space that has been paved, and there's no water removal. So I am asking that before the schools start and use this as a parking lot, even without the lighting, because I think they're going to try to do that in August, because they need it. There's no other parking. That there has to be a stormwater management that has to have taken place. We've got to get that in place. I was hoping that that was going to happen this summer. And that was part of the reason that I held off saying anything, even though I flooded again in May when we had all of that rain in May. But it's starting to negatively affect the floor of my garage and my basement, and I've never had this issue before paving all happened. So I'm happy to work with them, and but I really need for that to be addressed. The other thing with regard to the lighting, it does look like big lots. I drove around. That's going to have a real detrimental effect on the value of the property, that lighting that's currently proposed. And I have asked them to consider putting the lighting, if you go to Our Lady of Victory and you look at how, because they have houses very close to the parking lot, there'll be a post at the edge of the parking lot and the light will go over and be directed into the parking rather than to the home. Because even when it's focused, we see it. So there's lighting on the school building that goes down onto the playground, but it comes into my bedroom windows, it comes into the backyard. And so if it's focused into the parking lot rather than to the houses, we very much appreciate that. And something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing would be nice as well. But I certainly understand that the parking's going there. I have every expectation buses will go there. I prefer not, but that's just the reality of what's going to happen. But we'd like to make it as positive as possible. Also, with regard to screening, I am the only person with a fence. It's not a solid fence, it's a slat fence, and my fence is 2.5 feet off the property line, but everyone else, because it's just been a play area, it's just been green space, doesn't have a fence. They only have the school's fence there. So whatever we can do in terms of screening and making that more aesthetically pleasing would be very much appreciated by the residents on Broadway. So those are my two issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waters. I appreciate your time. So detailed lighting plan will be part of what's reviewed for our final approval. Excuse me. And then in regards to the water or drainage issue, I trust that that's something.
Yeah,
between.
we just received the email today. We'll have the design look at it to find out what the issue is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's something that you would be interested to know.
Yep.
Chairman Gentry?
Yes.
There was one other public comment from Bill Miller, 1241 Broadview Avenue. I don't know if you mentioned that. I apologize if I misheard you.
Over here.
Yep, I have it up on the screen as well right now. That's helpful.
Is Mr. Miller here to speak?
No.
Oh, okay.
But there was they submitted through the public forum.
Okay, yeah. And make that available. I think, I'm one up here now. The concerns were definitely about the screening, the fence at the parking lot. So I think some of the commission members brought up potential other types of fencing to explore.
Yep. We'll look at that.
Chief, can I ask a question? Is the existing paved lot that she was talking about, is that supposed to be the permanent lot? Is
No.
it something temporary?
Temporary.
Okay, just wasn't sure. So it's expected to be all torn out and there's going to be paving done and final paving, that was just a temporary down?
I believe it's the first layer of asphalt in that lot, correct? So there's another layer that goes onto it, but we'll verify the grades in terms of the lot. I know that there's also, I believe it's 3 catch basins currently located outside between the lot and the fence. I believe those have dandy bags on them today because of sediment control. We need to look at that to make sure that the water's getting into those.
Is
But
there-
we'll have that study.
Is there a curb around the perimeter of the parking to hold that water, but it's not there right now?
No, the curb is there.
No.
And it's still the water goes over?
The curb's not there.
The curb is not
was
That's what I'm saying.
The curb is not
If
there.
the curb was there, we'd be holding the water at least.
Right.
I think I did just FYI, spoke with the construction team yesterday, kind of followed up some today about this issue. And as Rick mentioned, they're looking at how to finish out for a temporary situation in a way that will alleviate these concerns, including looking at curbing in the near term, getting rid of obviously the regrading so that the catch basins that have been installed can work. And of course, there'll be, we requested to have grass planted in the short term. There'll be more improvements in the long term, but grass planted in the short term in that area around the parking lot. I feel like there was one other thing. Well, obviously now, as Rick mentioned, those inlets are covered. And honestly, the end of sort of mid-block, current end of Fairview right now has had a terrible time with flooding in general throughout the construction phase because all of the inlets are covered. But that will improve dramatically here shortly when we have those improvements. The outlets that were kind of part of the circle are being relocated. There'll be a little piece of road or access drive that gets built from the southern end of Fairview to access that lot temporarily. And as part of that, the new storm inlets will be installed on Fairview. Those will be working because there won't be construction right up against them. And these, the new catch basins that are between the parking lot and the backyards of the residences on Fairview will also be able to be put into action. There's still, the construction team is looking into how to do all of that. It wasn't necessarily planned or known that it needed to be happen until really just the last day or two. So I don't have confirmation on everything, but we've communicated to them that that would be the city's preference in order to caretake the neighbors.
Councilman Panzera, any more questions?
Thank you, Chair Gentry. The only concern I had or comment or kind of extension of dialogue was exactly what you mentioned about the fence and the surrounding the multi-purpose area.
You're the same song.
Was that?
You're the same song.
No, it wasn't based on the song, but I did hear your comment about the song. And specifically, you know, I know you're trying to address kind of the natural human behavior of leaving that field open and some kids wanting to cut across it. There's another opening where the curve starts to bend, is that correct?
Correct.
And so that same human tendency is going to exist there to walk across the field rather than to walk on the path, because the path circumvents the whole area. And so it's not an easy solution, but I want to kind of piggyback on that and also talk a little bit about how we are, and we're just beginning to address the interactivity or non-interactivity that's going to occur between the city park in the future and the multi-purpose space. So what I'm feeling right now is that that's a very defined barrier, but yet we want it to be conjoined in a better way, I think. So it's a tough solution, but that's why the room is full of professional people that provide these solutions. I don't have it, but it is a strong concern for me. You know, the city and the school are on the way to an agreement to swap that land and to make the necessary improvements on what was the previous parking lot, and it's going to give a great field of vision for the new structure. But for it to be impeded by a fence that says, well, you can't get past it, then what do we do with that park? How do we integrate that into the fabric of our park system? And And then, though, there's this other park right on the other side of the fence, and you have to walk around it, and then you're still on the grass. So that's it. I'm hopeful that we can continue to kind of progress to maybe some different ideas about it, and just bring it up as a concern this evening.
Mr. Chairman, when he's done.
I yield back.
So for the school, not so much for this review, but for the school, I would suggest that they consider at the southwest and the southeast corner of the junior high school, hard surface at those corners as gathering places before school, so that there's just not a little sidewalk and then there's grass. Because I have a tendency that the guys will be hanging out there and the girls will be hanging out there. But to look at the intersections of grass and paving and where they naturally might gather, I would think you'd want to do that. And now to the point that dragging on of the condition of fencing, I would ask you to look at the site plan. The site plan is basically an elongated square south of the addition, which is the junior high school. In the northwest corner of that square is something occupying the larger square. Same is true on the northeast corner. On the southwest corner, there are 4 residences that are anchoring much in the same as a drop-off to the northwest and a drop-off to the northeast. There is a proposal for an additional park on the southeast corner. Therefore, those 4 ideas at the corners of the multi-purpose thing formalizes that condition. And it's not so much what goes in each one, it's that the formalization of that condition makes it more recognizable for a long time, rather than making it mush between one and the other. As far as the fence is concerned, it is true that fences bar people from doing things, but fences also identify ownership. And it is sort of nice to be able to tell your kid, you're not on school property, or you are on school property. And as long as the fence doesn't happen to be one of separation in the sense of exclusion, but it becomes one of formalizing the article aesthetic condition, I think it's probably okay. And as long as it's 30 inches, 36 inches high, 32 inches high, it's not that big an obstacle. And we just heard that people can jump over those by the previous applicant. Thank you.
Councilman?
No, I mean, obviously, Bob and I agree sometimes, and we don't agree sometimes. That's okay. You know, it's not widely understood. In fact, it's probably not minimally understood that the elementary school playground is on city park land. So there's already this kind of shared, unified use that we've all been accustomed to, and I don't have any. I don't see a strong necessity to define between where the city plot is, or I'm sorry, lot is, and where the school lot starts. And God forbid there ever be any sort of different rule that might apply to this side of the field as opposed to that side of the field in terms of use or in terms of appropriate hours, et cetera. But I'm sure that with continued dialogue, we can find a good solution. You guys are going to vote on it, not me anyway.
Very pleased with how the plan has come along. Really appreciate the school team and the school leadership putting the vision out there and then working towards it. And really want to thank you for that. Obviously, thank planning, engineering, and safety staff for many, many hours of work to vet this with the school team. And I think going through every iteration was was a valuable exercise and I think resulted in a very, very good plan and a dramatic improvement over what it could be without this. From the city's perspective, this advances our goals of enhancing the civic opportunities in that area. Whatever the plan for the park is, whatever the fencing plan is, it's going to be beautiful. It will be a fantastic site for the school and it'll be wonderful for the community. Really bringing online more green space is always a great thing in the small community. And we are pleased with the improvements, obviously the safety, the opportunity to plan around existing conditions. The operation of the school has changed through the years, and we know what we are dealing with now in terms of conditions, and I think this has been very responsive to that with respect to walking patterns, and it really has minimal impact to the neighborhood. As was mentioned, the drop-off patterns are really very similar to what they were before, so it'll be noticed, but I think it'll be noticed in a positive way and be minimally changed. So we're very, very happy with this. We appreciate the partnership.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo those comments. I'm dropping kids off, picking kids up, and I'm foreseeing a future, being all over this site. So, I don't want my comments about the fence to reflect on how I feel about the site. I think I really like the plan that we put together, and we take into account the park and playground features. Really do look great. I'm very excited about it. There's just that one thing that I'd like to be addressed. All right, we'll take comment from.
I apologize. Apologies for showing up late. I haven't sworn myself in, so I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I was listening at home, and I was thinking I kind of knew where. I'm sorry? Steve Reynolds, 1070 Virginia Avenue. Okay. Probably wouldn't have dressed quite like this had I planned to show up as well, but I was listening at home to the meeting. My life is that exciting. I listen to planning commission meetings when they show up, when they occur. And I was torn as to whether to come tonight prior to start the meeting at overtime. Because I think an issue that I want to address at this point might be filed under that ship has already sailed. But I think it's still very important to talk about it nonetheless. In 2019, when this issue came up previously, I was on council. Planning Commission had made considerations of an earlier iteration of the plan. That was presented to council along with the resolution and some additional information for our consideration, for our support, for preliminary support for the road work and so forth that might be done. But I think it's important to note at that time, there was more than one plan under consideration. There was the Reconnect plan, which the previous administration was very much for. And there was one or even two plans that didn't show reconnecting. I don't have a horse in this race. I went to Grandview 1,000 million years ago, but I don't live on the street. I don't have kids to drop off. But I still think it's very important that we, at that time I thought it was very important, still do think it's very important, that we have a more public discussion, that there had been this alternative. I don't quite know what happened to that in the last 2 years. That seems to have gone by the wayside. We had this, I thought, my recollection as I was on council, was that there was going to be an additional, more public, inclusive discussion of what was going on, not just the folks on the street, not just who live on the street, not just the people that the city deems to be stakeholders. And part of the concern that I raised at that time was that at least the information, or some of it, which was presented to council, was just not accurate. It was, quite frankly, false. It was stated to us that the Places and Spaces report, that the plan itself stated a recommendation for connection of Fairview. I looked at the report. I know what we approved. I thought we debunked the idea. That report did not recommend connection of Fairview. And at least as importantly, that wasn't part of his charge. That was a master facilities plan for the city of Grandview Heights. There's no reason for it to have talked about it. It talks briefly about Fairview. But if somebody can show me where it says in there, a recommendation, I'd like to see it, because I don't really think that's in the version the council approved, because I brought it up at the time.
This plan that's up right now, what about this plan makes this project less safe than the alternative? It was discussed, I think there were three options, at least three options, and we as a planning commission discussed those and encouraged the school board to pursue this option based on the safety features that it provides the community and the access it provides the community, the opportunities it provides the community. So I guess that should pass sail. What about this plan? It is not safe or not good for Grandview.
What about this plan is better than any other plan? I don't know, because we didn't talk about any other plan.
Yeah.
That discussion,
We did.
well,
At least I did.
we did, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it or was it not presented to planning commission as well? Was it not stated at that time that the Places and Spaces plan recommended reconnection? It's my understanding that was presented to you as well as factual. So, again, I don't have a horse in this race, I don't know, but I think we've done what I kind of knew was going to happen. The notion that we were going to truly explore and vet the alternative in a public place where people who knew that's what we're talking about would have a chance to talk about it before it gets to this point where I'm not blaming the planning commission, because you guys don't set the agenda of how plans move forward from the administration to fruition. You folks are part of the process and a very important part of it. So I'm not trying to come at you personally or as a group. It's not your fault, but I'm saying we skipped a very important part of the process that back in 2019, I was very much led to believe would be there.
Can I add just a comment? We've been doing the planning commission meetings for over a year virtually. It's actually been beneficial to get more feedback from the public. I mean, the development of Grandview, I mean, it was numerous emails. It makes it easier for people to speak up. My point here is, we had 2 emails and it was about the fencing. Not one single person mentioned that they have a problem with opening Fairview. So if I were to vote, I don't see an opposition. I personally don't see a problem, so I'm finding it hard to believe and understand that there's opposition in the community to open this. That's just thought.
If I may, in 2019, there were folks who were concerned about it and who wanted to discuss it further. Those folks really, I don't think most people follow and think that that's going to be strictly a planning commission thing. If we look at the process and what was discussed at the council, again, not your fault, it really sounded like there's going to be a bigger public discussion of this. And I mean public specific to this issue, not once it comes to you folks to talk about all the various specifics of it. There's not even a plan B for the public to consider anymore. In 2019 there was. Some of us very painstakingly made sure that the resolution council passed was altered to make sure, I thought, make sure it was clear that there would be additional discussion about it, and that we were, by voting for a recommendation to approve support of the roadway, not voting to approve support of automatically the completion of the street. I think the transparency of it is an important thing. I think the process of it is important. I don't blame the Planning Commission for that not occurring, but I think it's unfortunate, although not surprising that that happened.
history around the project. I really haven't been engaged with it, honestly. Sorry, everybody. I was busy doing other things when you guys were doing a lot of the school planning, but among the things that I found there was the evidence of sharing during the school's public processes, which were extensive, with regard to different ideas for how the site might be arranged. And the outcome of those is actually on the website. There it was voted something like 49% of people prefer the version with the road connecting, and an even split with a couple other people, like half of the rest of the people preferring a like in from both ends and disconnected in the middle version, and the fewest people preferring something that wasn't connected. So there actually was a public process around that. I wasn't aware of that back then, but became aware of it doing research on the project. So I actually, in terms of where I started with studying, I started there in a sense, also looked at the Red Planning Commission's responses to the initial two versions that were presented, one of which had the road connected and the other did not. And Planning Commission expressed a strong preference for reconnecting the road. So taking together the public input, the Planning Commission sort of started there. And then we engaged our safety services folks, both police and fire and traffic engineering, and said, this seems to be the community's preference. Help us understand how it might happen. And so we went through, I gotta say, it was a dozen different permutations of how it might happen, and arrived at a few top contenders, if you will. And then we did have public meetings. We had kind of focused stakeholder meetings in order to give people a good opportunity to speak freely. We had a separate meeting for the folks on Fairview, a separate meeting for the folks on Oakland, and then a meeting where we invited people from all of the surrounding area to be able to come in. And we gave them a presentation of all the different versions we studied, explained why we were recommending the specific traffic circulation pattern that ultimately was recommended. And I would say the outcome of those meetings was a concurrence that it looked like the best plan that could be developed given all the different constituencies who cared about how the streets function, who are right there. So we were encouraged by that. There were absolutely some questions that came out of those meetings. One of them was about the traffic signal operation, so we followed up after that and asked our city engineer to really study the operation of that signal and make sure that it's the right thing to put a signal there, not to put a flasher there, or to put different operation at different times of day. We kind of dove into that question that came out of those public meetings. We got a question about the no left turn signal on Oakland because it was previously signed as all the time. And the question was why is that the case? It really doesn't need to be other than school hours for sure. And we actually have already had that sign replaced as a result of that community input. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some things, but in general, I feel like the combination of all of that outreach was genuine and resulted in good understanding. Nothing's perfect. There's a lot that the streets around here need to do. They need to serve the residents. They need to serve the schools. They need to serve the community. It's a difficult problem to solve, honestly, how best to do it. They need to be safe. They need to be accessible for safety services. And I think that the process that we went through was responsive to the input that the community had in the original school study, was responsive to the Planning Commission, and did allow input for residents with particularly high stakeholder status for the changes to the roads to weigh in. And that kind of led us to tonight. We wanted to do that before coming back to Planning Commission, so that if there were real resistance or desire to have something else, we would have been able to consider that before coming forward, but we didn't find that in the meeting, so we don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Is there any other?
Could I address just the commission part of that?
No, I'm not going to use the planning commission meeting to air grievances with city council. They have forums to do that.
Well, they provided you with misinformation again, but
You
okay.
spoke your piece on this case. Gotta move on.
Okay, thank you.
I just want some clarification, because in the agenda on 2B that mentions the preliminary plat, Was that in the package?
No, no. What I was setting commission up for, so to speak, is the expectation that we will bring that in August. Let me come back.
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, it
Thank
doesn't
you.
exist yet.
Anything else, Commissioner? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.